You know what really surprised me when I started learning more about French culture? It wasn't the food or the lifestyle or even the language itself. It was realizing that from a very young age, French people are taught how to think out loud and how natural that feels to them. Hi, I'm Rachel and welcome to Rachelle mais français. This podcast is where I talk about learning French and loving French culture, and also how this journey keeps revealing parts of myself that I didn't expect it to revisit. I grew up in Hong Kong, I live in the UK now, and learning French has somehow become the mirror that helps me understand how culture shapes our voice, our confidence, and even our silence. If you love French culture or its language, or even you're simply curious about how people think and communicate differently, you're very welcome here. To begin with, I would like to start with a story. Because this topic didn't come from books or research, it came from life's experience. Years ago, when I was still an undergraduate student in Hong Kong, I was sitting in a university class called Film 101. There were 8 of us, 7 students from Hong Kong and mainland China, and 1 exchange student from France. We watched a short film, nothing complicated. Then the professor turned around and asked a simple question. So, what do you think? And suddenly, the room froze. No one spoke. No one made any eye contact. People looked down at their notes and pretended to write something important, pretended to think. Then a few minutes passed. Eventually, the French exchange student spoke up. Not dramatically, not loudly, but just naturally. So he shared his interpretation of the film and then turned to the rest of us and said, "And you, what do you think?" And again, silence. Can you imagine that? He looked genuinely confused, as if he was thinking, what the heck are these people doing here? So we looked really uncomfortable. And I remember feeling this quiet tension in my body, that familiar feelings of I have thoughts, but I don't know if it's safe to share them. We were not silenced because we had nothing to say. We were silenced because many of us grew up believing that being wrong in public comes with consequences. And that moment stayed with me, long before I ever learned French. So years later, when I started learning French and paying closer attention to French culture, that memory suddenly made sense. So France has a long tradition of valuing ideas, not just privately but out loud. And yes, we always mention the philosophers like Descartes, Rousseau, Voltaire, but there is one line that really captures the mindset, which is Je pense donc je suis. I think, therefore I am. It's not just a philosophical sentence. It reflects a cultural belief that your thoughts matter and that expressing them is part of who you are. For centuries, cafes in Paris weren't just places to drink coffee. They were places to discuss politics, morality, societies, existence. People didn't wait to be invited to speak. Thinking out loud was normal, so debating in France isn't seen as rude. It is not emotional conflict, it's participation. And suddenly I understood that French exchange student in my class. He wasn't confident in a way we usually defined confidence. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply doing what felt normal in his cultural world, sharing his thoughts. But cultures don't just magically appear, they are taught. And that is where the French education system really fascinated me. There's a very famous essay structure that French students learn early on. They are thèse, antithèse, synthèse, and at first it sounds academic, very formal. But when you really sit with it, it's teaching something very specific. It's teaching students to say, here's one idea. Now let's take the opposite seriously. And now let's bring both together and think again. What I admire about this is that students aren't rewarded for being quick. They are not rewarded for certainty, and they are rewarded for thinking, for pausing, and for holding 2 opposite ideas at the same time without rushing to shut one down. And when you grow up practicing this, Debating later in life doesn't feel threatening. It feels familiar. It's not arrogance. It's training, habit, and culture. Like learning to ride a bike when you're young, and eventually you don't think about balance anymore because your body just knows. So French students grow up balancing ideas in the same way. Coming from my own background, this felt emotionally unfamiliar. Growing up in Hong Kong, speaking up often felt risky. Getting something wrong could feel embarrassing, so silence felt safer for us. So when I first encountered French-style discussion, I didn't see it as confidence. I saw it as something I wasn't taught. And once I understood that, I stopped comparing personalities. I started comparing systems, the education, the cultural expectation, and that shift changed how I relate to French culture completely. Another thing I noticed, especially when traveling in France and during my time in Toulouse, is that disagreement doesn't automatically damage relationship. People can debate passionately, interrupt each other, challenge ideas, and then move on. No lingering tension, no emotional fallout, because disagreement there isn't seen as rejection, it's engagement. And once I understood that, French conversations felt much less intimidating. This reflection feels especially important today as we live in a world of fast opinions, instant reactions, and endless content. AI generates answers instantly, and social media rewards outrage. Nuance feels inconvenience. So, in that world, being trained to pause and think is becoming a rare skill. The French habit of slowing down, examining both sides, and synthesizing instead of polarizing feels incredibly relevant. Not because it's French, but because it helps people live with complexity. To say, I'm not sure yet, let me think, let me hear the other side, that's not weakness, that's maturity. Before we wrap up, I also want to share something small but meaningful with you. Because if learning French and learning about French culture has taught me anything, it's that the way we think, imagine, and speak to ourselves really shapes how confident we feel expressing ideas in the world. I've created a free French vision board template for anyone who's learning French, loving French culture, or simply wants a gentle reminder of why we started. It's something you can use digitally as your phone and laptop wallpaper, or print out and keep somewhere you'll see often. Nothing complicated, just a quiet visual anchor for your intentions. You can download it for free, and I'll put the link in the episode description. And if this episode resonated with you, I really recommend listening to the previous one, Why French Culture is So Irresistible to Me. That episode is more about the feeling of falling in love with French culture, and this one is about understanding why that love keeps deepening. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and I'll see you very soon in the next episode.